Greetings, fellow Toastmasters and guests. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Great to see the good show out for the meeting. Always good to see. So let's start with the question. In your opinion, what is the hardest part of crafting this speech? Now, I don't expect you to respond. We're virtual. So I'll go ahead and answer it. I gave you a few minutes, a few seconds to think about it. But for me, it's creating an introduction. If it takes me all day to write a speech, then about half to three-fourths of the day is focused on creating that correct introduction. It really takes me way too long to craft that introduction. So if you're like me, any tips, techniques, ideas to make that process easier, more efficient are always welcome. So today I would like to continue our path through the Toastmasters Better series, a Better Speaker series, by discussing how, sorry, by discussing how to create a compelling beginning to your speech. This is the eighth different topic that I've discussed from this series, with the most recent discussion focusing on how to effectively use body language in a speech. And sadly, to Fawaz's point earlier, this series will be coming to a close relatively soon, so you won't have to deal with too many more of these speeches from me. Uh, but today we're going to focus on the topic that we hinted at a little bit earlier, and that is beginning your speech. So if you are interested in catching up on all of the series that we've gone through, all of these speeches are posted on YouTube, so you can connect into the Better Speaker series that way. But back to the topic at hand, which is crafting an effective beginning to your speech. The first moments of a speech are critical to the success of the speech. If those first moments are dull, lifeless, or unimaginative, then the audience can lose interest in the rest of the speech. However, an exciting and engaging, a creative beginning will help grab and keep the listener's attention. There are some criteria that can help you craft a successful opening. These criteria include getting the attention of the audience. A listener's attention needs to be refocused away from any distractions and towards you as the speaker. A listener's attention, a good beginning draws the audience's attention, the listener's attention to the speaker and to the presentation. So if we think about how I started today's meeting, I opened up with a question. And by asking the question, this allows you to think about the topic at hand, and then hopefully I drummed up some interest in the topic that we were going to speak about as well. You also always want to introduce the topic. The beginning of your speech should indicate what the speaker will be talking about and the ideas that you're going to be sharing. When listeners understand the topic and how they're going to benefit from actually listening and engaging in speech, they're going to more immediately pay close attention to the speech. So if you're talking about public speaking, it may be good to introduce the topic and how public speaking is necessary in many facets of our lives, both professionally and personally. And then speakers should also look to establish rapport with the audience. The audience will be more receptive to the ideas that you're trying to convey if the speaker appears friendly to the audience and interested in the audience as well, also showing personal interest in the subject. So there are some effective ways to establish rapport with the audience. These include smiling, just showing that you're a friendly person, showing enthusiasm about the speech at hand or the topic at hand, and then making eye contact. In a virtual setting, you want to look at your camera as much as possible. For me, it's a little challenging because I have like this nice light behind it, but also I'm blinding myself a little bit as I'm speaking to you all because the light's shining right in my eyes. And then finally, speakers should also take less than 5 to 10% of the entirety of the speech time when you're trying to begin your speech. The majority of the time should actually be spent focusing on the body or the content of the main content of the speech. But there are some techniques for opening a speech that can help calm a speaker's nerves and also give clarity of mind. Techniques can also help you generate new ideas over time as well. So it's always good to have these techniques to be able to refer back to. I'm going to go through 7 techniques today with you all in hopes that these techniques will help create or help you as a speaker create a better opening and make it easier to create those openings as well. So the first technique that we'll go through today is stating the importance of the topic. So stating of the importance of the topic tells your listeners why the topic is important to them. It makes that connection. So, for example, in a speech concerning overexposure to the sun, the speaker may begin by saying that a golden tan may be glamorous, may look great, but the overexposure to the sun can age your skin and can actually lead to skin cancer. Thus, it's important to protect yourself from the harmful rays of the sun. So, that's an example of how you can tell the listeners how important the topic is to them to draw their interest to what you're going to be speaking about. Secondly, you can make a startling statement. So, startle your listeners with an intriguing statement that will compel them to listen further. So, building upon the previous example that we talked about, or well, where you're exposing yourself to health risks, you could uh, make something or make more of a startling statement by saying that smoking kills. More Americans die each year from smoking than were killed in battle during World War II and the Vietnam War combined. So that is a startling statement how much death smoking can cause and how risky it is to the health of you as an individual. Another technique that speakers can use is to arouse suspense and curiosity. So you can use a series of statements related to the topic that can both pique your listener's interest and draw them in closer to what you're trying to convey. So, for instance, today I could have started off the speech with facts about how quickly a speaker can lose the audience's attention. I've gone through some trainings on elevator pitches, and it's clear that you can lose an audience's attention in the first 7 to 10 seconds of your actual speech. So, having a great beginning to your speech is critical, and that's a way in which we could have aroused some suspense or built up your curiosity just with a few statements at the beginning of the speech. Another technique that you can leverage as a speaker is to tell a story or to tell an anecdote. So, tell an amusing tale, a dramatic story, or an anecdote which can arouse interest in the topic that you're trying to convey, and it can get the audience involved as well. So, you do want to make sure that you keep the story or the anecdote relevant to the topic of the speech that you're going to be discussing and try to personalize it wherever you can. So, if you're going to tell the audience about a time you went hunting with your brother, you're not going to want to start the sentence off by saying that two men were hunting in the woods on this day. Instead, you may want to say that my brother and I were hunting last week in the woods behind my house. Makes it more personal, you're a little bit more descriptive, and it makes it more of a connection between you and the events that you're talking about. In addition, a speaker can ask a rhetorical question as well. Ask one question or a series of questions that relate to your speech topic. And then the audience is going to be able to think about an answer and thus will start to think about your topic. That's the approach that I took at the beginning of this speech as well. Every question that you ask in a virtual setting, unless you're hoping to get raised hands or reactions via the different memes you can use on the virtual platform, every question you ask is going to be rhetorical because people are not really going to be able to respond in the moment. But it's not about having that response, it's about asking the audience or getting the audience to think about what you're saying. Think about the topic at hand, and thus they're going to become more interested in the topic that you'll be speaking about again. Now, this example is so let's go to number 5 here. And so this number 6, sorry, you may also a good technique here is to begin your speech with a quotation. So beginning your speech with a quote is always a good technique. There are a few reasons why it's a good technique, but it's an easy and effective way to attract the audience's attention. A quotation can enhance speeches by adding authority to a speech, amusing the audience, and dramatizing a speech point. So it's always good to build up some suspense or to build up some drama in your speech by bringing in a quote. So quotes are good, but you do want to remember, as we talked about earlier, keep the quotes short, to the point, relevant to the speech that you're trying to, and the ideas that you're trying to convey through your speech. Some good sources for quotations. If you're like me, you're looking on the internet, you're looking in books, you're looking at older historical figures, but you could also rely on your family and friends for good sources of quotes as well. The audience doesn't have to be in tune with the quote, but if the quote is relevant to what you're trying to say, it could be still good to include. The audience isn't going to know about a quote from your family or your friends, but if it's relevant to what you're trying to convey, it'll still be effective to leverage. And then finally, the last technique that we'll talk about today is referencing the occasion. This can be an effective technique as it allows the speaker to recognize an important or an unusual event, and it allows you to establish a common interest with the audience or build some common ground. So, for instance, if you're giving a toast at a wedding, one effective approach is to start by referencing the wedding and referencing the event, thanking thanking everybody for coming to the event or being grateful to be there for your friend at the event. Referencing the event at the beginning of your toast or the beginning of your speech is definitely an effective technique that can help you build an effective beginning. The techniques that we just went through are the most frequently used approaches, but they're not the only techniques that a speaker can use to establish or an effective speech opening. Other techniques can include using humor. We all like jokes. Cracking jokes puts a smile on the audience's faces, allows you to relax as a speaker because you could also hopefully you find the jokes funny as well. So it's always good to have a humor or a joke or two in your beginning. You could also look to engage the audience through audience participation, asking the audience a question, having them react using their hands or their faces or using the chat as well. You could also leverage a demonstration. So in the past, Fawaz has given a speech about how he likes to exercise and rowing, and he likes to use the kettlebell. One effective way would be for Fawaz to begin his speech would be to show the audience what he means by rowing or how he kettlebells to really get some interest and make us wonder what is Fawaz doing, and then he'll get into his speech. So that's an example of how we may be able to use a demonstration. And then finally, you could also reference an historical event. So if you're talking about NIST and the history of NIST, you may want to start by referencing when the National Bureau of Standards, NBS, became NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Sorry, not too far. All right. So just as there are positive techniques to practice and to keep in mind, it's also important to keep in mind of techniques or not techniques, but rather mistakes to try to avoid when you're beginning your speech. So what you want to do is avoid acknowledging the amount of preparation. I am at fault of this. I know in my times when I've given impromptu speeches, I mentioned, oh, I haven't had time to really prepare for the speech, and this is an impromptu speech. And while that is good for certain occasions, and maybe it wasn't too harmful in the times in which I've given those impromptu speeches, you want to try not to address it because if the speaker has spent little time preparing and states that fact, the speaker may, in fact, invalidate their speech, the content that they're talking about, because you're not really showing much enthusiasm or you didn't really show that you were really prepared or practice this idea or the speech that you'll be giving. That can push the audience away from your beginning. So you want to make sure you avoid that at all costs. You also want to avoid being dull and boring. You don't want to just start out your speech by saying, greetings, everybody. I'm here to give my speech today. I'm here to talk about beginning your speech. And then just dive right into the body of the speech because that's really dull and boring. And if the audience isn't invested at the beginning of your speech, then you're probably going to lose them at the beginning or at least halfway through the speech. So you want to make sure your opening is exciting, involved, you're smiling, or you're asking them to think, leveraging the techniques that we talked about a little bit earlier. And then you want to avoid delaying the topic. I think I have heard other recommendations where it's good to build some interest, right? And we talked about that earlier, building some suspense. But you don't want to go too far because it's sort of a double-edged sword. While building suspense is a good thing, you don't want to keep the audience so distant from the ideas that you're going to be talking about. The sooner you can share the ideas you'll be talking about, the better. It's easier for the audience to understand how it relates to them, what they'll get out of it, and what to expect from the speech that's at hand as well. So, in conclusion, a dynamic beginning is essential for a successful speech. If you have it, take the extra time to create an exciting and imaginative opening beginning to your speech that's going to grab your listeners' attention and get them focused on you as the speaker and the ideas that you want to convey. So, first impressions can be lasting impressions. Really remember that. First impressions can be lasting impressions. So, ensure that the first impression is positive by leveraging some of these techniques discussed today. And if you have any questions, we're here as the Toastmasters officers to help you out. So, thank you for your time today. It's been great talking to you. And hopefully, we'll all be able to craft some excellent beginnings to our speeches that we'll be giving in the near future. So, thank you. And back to you, Fawaz.
Nico is giving it is doing a series of speeches, and I believe, like, I think this is the third time we've said it today. This is the second to the last speech, and every one of them has been really good. They've been really phenomenal. And one of the things I literally wrote down is there has to be a place where we can get these slides from, because a lot of the things I struggle with, especially with the introduction. So I would just like to go back and just reference these. So I know you mentioned that they're on the YouTube channel, which I want to say is a good thing, because this is a series, and you reference that. You reference the fact that this is an ongoing series. You reference the fact that they can find the other videos in the series. And I like that it was a good introduction on a speech about introduction. If it wasn't, I was gonna be like, come on, man, you can do better than that. But no, you were great. I like the introduction a lot. I like how you kind of put everything together. And also, I like how you break it down a lot. I don't remember all of them, but I think I can see the fact that I struggle with a lot of the openings, and I think my openings are too boring now. And honestly, that's why I say I want to go back and look at these, because there were a lot of things I could do better. The fact that you can reference historical, I think, is it historical or events, or the fact that you can reference something that everyone can know to kind of get them on the same page. The fact that you can say a question to get them interested. The fact that you can do starter them, just keep them engaged. You don't want to bore them. And I really took a lot away from this speech, especially like you said, even though it's just the introduction of a speech, is a very important part of a speech. It's how you start it. And I also like how you how you emphasize the importance of the speech, of the introduction. I really got that. I really got that from your speech. And honestly, it was kind of weird that you were going to talk 15 minutes about an introduction, but it made sense. You said, hey, this is why I'm going to talk about it. And then you talked about it. So it was really good. The conclusion was also really good. You said something, the transition was really good. Even though it was a speech about introduction, the conclusion was also really good. And now some challenges. I like the fact that you did the background. I think that was a way better way to do it than last time, but the slide doesn't really work well with your I don't want to say your person. The fact that it's yellow and then black, and then you're wearing black, and then it cuts off like at your shoulder. It's a little weird. I think you should practice more with WebEx and just see how it looks, and then you can change the background whether you like it. And the other thing before I go on to before I stop is towards the end, there was a bit of, I think the slide transition didn't really match well with what you wanted to say. It sounded like you wanted to say the whole slide, you wanted to present it as a whole, but the slide transitions were coming in one at a time. So I feel like you should match the slide transition with how you want to present your message. But that was about it. Again, I think this is a really good series. I think you should keep giving it. And it's sad that it's about to come to an end. Thank you very much.